The arrival of the room was cold and silent, with silver walls and blue lights blinking slowly, as if the ship itself was breathing in the middle of that silence. She stood, barefoot, skin pale, eyes glowing like silver moons. She looked at the creatures sitting in the circle around her, each one from a different world, some with sharp teeth, some with green skin, some with tentacles instead of hands. They all looked at her, but said nothing. Her voice was calm like water in a frozen lake, and yet carried weight like a falling star. She said these words slowly, clearly, almost like a final prayer. "My body is perfect. You can have me for food." No one moved, no one spoke. One alien licked its lips but stayed silent. Another looked away as if ashamed. A third one tapped its claws nervously on the table, but still silence. Then footsteps echoed from the metal hallway, slow, steady boots of a human soldier. His armor was scratched, his face tired, but his eyes sharp like broken glass. He entered the room and stopped near the doorway, watching her carefully. She turned her head slowly, and her eyes met his. There was no fear in her face, only calmness, like she had already accepted her fate, or maybe she was beyond fear. Now her hands were tied in front of her, not with rope, but with glowing blue energy cuffs. Her knees were weak, but she stood tall like a warrior who refused to fall even at the edge of death. Other aliens turned to look at the human, their eyes asking the same silent question. Would he take the offer? Would he claim the prize? Would he finally speak? He did, but just one word. He said, "Noah." Pause followed, longer than time itself. Even the ship seemed to freeze. The lights blinked slower, the air felt heavier. She tilted her head slightly and said why. The human walked closer, stopping just a few steps away from her, his eyes scanning her face, not like a hunter looking at prey, but like a lost man trying to understand a language he had never heard before. He said, "You are not food." She gave a small smile, not of joy, but of sadness, maybe pity, maybe surprise. She said, "I am the last of my kind. I was made to be strong, to be perfect. They took me, they broke my world, and left me with nothing, so I offer myself, because that is the only thing I have left." The human did not reply right away. His hand moved near his side, where his weapon rested, but he did not touch it. His other hand clenched and unclenched, as if holding something invisible. He asked, "Who are they?" She looked around the room slowly, her eyes passing over the aliens still seated around the circle. None of them met her gaze. They were silent again, their heads low, their shame louder than any words. She said, "They watched my people die, and they did nothing. And now they gather here to feed on the last piece of a broken star." Human's jaw tightened, his breath slow and deep, his fingers twitched. He looked around the room and said, "You all just sat here, you all just waited for her to fall." None answered. One alien got up quietly and left the room, head down, shoulders heavy like a guilty child. Another hissed under its breath, but said nothing. Woman's knees finally gave in. She started to fall, but the human stepped forward and caught her gently, his hands strong but careful, like holding something ancient, something that should never break again. He looked at her and said, "I am not like them," she whispered then in a voice only he could hear. "Then why are you here?" The human paused, his eyes looking into hers, and said, "Maybe to find something worth saving." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a memory from long ago. A soft sound escaped her lips, maybe a laugh, maybe a sigh, and she said, "No one else answered, only you." He held her steady and looked around once more at the silent crowd, then turned and started walking away, taking her with him. Step by step, his boots echoed louder than any voice in that quiet room, each step like thunder, each step a choice behind them. No one moved, no one stopped them. They only watched as the human walked away with the one they called food. The one he called someone in the distance. Alarms blinked, but no one cared outside. The ship stars burned like old stories waiting to be told, and the journey had just begun. Asterisk. The night inside the ship was not like the night on a planet. It had no sky, no stars, just soft blue lights and quiet humming from the walls, like a machine dreaming while awake. The human placed her gently on a soft bench inside a small room. It was warm here and safe, at least for now. She looked at him, her silver eyes tired, but still burning like a fire hidden in snow. She touched her cuffs with slow fingers and asked, "Do you fear me?" He shook his head. slowly, then knelt beside her and touched the glowing cuffs. They clicked and faded, turning into dust like old memories. Lost in time, her hands were free again, and yet she did not move. She said they feared us once because we were strong, not with weapons but with hearts. We felt too deeply, loved too wildly, lived too bravely, and so they thought we were dangerous. The human sat down across from her, his back against the wall, his helmet beside him, his hair messy, his eyes full of questions. He asked, "What happened to your people?" Her voice was soft but sharp like a blade wrapped in silk. She said they came in peace, or so they said. They studied us. They called us beautiful, perfect, advanced, but what they truly wanted was control. They could not understand how we lived, how we gave more than we took, how we shared everything, even pain, and so they called it weakness. Then they used it against us. She closed her eyes and saw it again, smoke and fire falling from the sky, screams in the wind, children running without shoes, elders holding hands as buildings fell. She said, "We did not fight, not at first. We thought they would stop. We thought they would see our pain and turn away. But they did not." The human lowered his head, his hands clenched, his knuckles white. He said, "They did the same to others. My team found ruins of cities burned from orbit, families turned to ash, planets erased from maps, all in the name of order." She looked at him and said, "Then why did you stop? Why did you not take me like the others would have? Why did you say no?" He looked at her, eyes wide, voice low like thunder in a cave. He said, "Because you did not beg, because you stood like a warrior, even when you had nothing left, because I saw something in you that reminded me of us before we forgot who we were." She leaned back against the wall, breathing slowly, her chest rising and falling like waves in a silent ocean. She said, "Your kind is strange. Your hearts are not soft, but they break easy. Still you heal, still you try, still you hope." The human smiled a little, then looked away and said, "Sometimes we break and never heal. Sometimes we hurt others just to forget our own pain, but not all of us, not always." She said, "I was trained to read hearts, not words, and your heart speaks loud even in silence. It says you have lost much, yet carry it all alone, like a mountain holding the sky." He stood up and walked to the small window. The stars outside were cold and endless, like the future itself. He said, "We are heading back to my ship. They will not be happy when they see you." She said, "Will they try to take me again?" He said, "They might, but they will have to go through mesh." Stood now, legs strong again, her voice calm and full. She said, "That I will stand with you. If you fall, I fall. If you rise, I rise." He looked at her long and hard, like reading a book written in a language he had never seen. He said, "What is your name?" She paused as if searching for a word lost long ago, then said, "My name is not a sound, it is a meaning. It means light that refuses to die." He nodded slowly and said, "That is a good name." A soft alarm blinked on the screen nearby. They were close to the base. The moment of truth was near. He checked his weapon, checked her steps, watched how she walked without fear, how her eyes scanned everything, how her silence was louder than words. He thought, maybe she is not just a survivor. Maybe she is something more, something new, something dangerous to those who live by chains and fear. As they walked down the corridor, her steps beside his, not behind, not ahead, but beside the ship around them, seemed to listen to their breath, to their will, to their story. Just beginning, in a quiet voice, almost lost to the engine sound, she asked, "If your people reject me, will you too?" He stopped walking, turned to face her, eyes firm, but not hard, and said, "I did not reject you when I thought you were food. I will not reject you now that I know you are fire." She did not smile, but something inside her changed. Something deep and old, like a door opening in a room without walls. They kept walking forward into a world waiting with questions, into a fight neither fully understood, but both were now part of. The silence behind them was heavy, but the future ahead was full of noise, and they were ready. The stars outside the glass moved like silent rivers, shining cold and white, as the ship turned toward a dark station hidden behind the rings of a dead planet. The human stood still inside the control room, eyes fixed on the blinking lights in front of him, heart heavy with thoughts too loud to ignore. She stood behind him, arms crossed, voice quiet like snow falling on metal. She said, "You do not have to do this. They will not accept me. They will ask questions, and you will have no good answers. turned slowly, and looked at her face that held no fear, only truth. She was not asking for help, she was giving him a way out. He could take it, he could lie, say she was lost, say he never saw her, say nothing at all, and no one would know. But he knew. And that was enough. He said, I made a choice the moment I heard your voice. I cannot walk away now, even if they turn on me, even if they call me a traitor, even if I lose everything. She stepped closer and looked at him, not like an alien looking at a stranger, but like a warrior measuring another before battle. She said, then stand tall, do not look away. When they call you a fool, do not bend when they offer you safety in exchange for silence. Nodded once and walked toward the door, his weapon at his side, his badge hidden in his coat, his past behind him, and his future written in her eyes. The station opened its gates slowly. Metal grinding against metal, voices filled the air, loud and sharp questions thrown like knives. Who is she? What are you doing? What gives you the right to bring her here? Human did not answer at first. He let them speak, let them shout, let them guess and fear and accuse until the noise became a wall. Then he raised one hand and said, she is not a weapon, she is not a prisoner, she is a person, and I will not hand her over. Silence fell hard and heavy, like a mountain dropped from the sky. Officers stared, doctors whispered, soldiers reached for their guns, but no one moved first. No one dared to cross the line drawn by his voice. The commander stepped forward, her face cold as ice, her eyes sharp as broken glass. She said, you disobeyed orders. You broke protocol. You risked the entire mission for a creature we know nothing about. He said, I know enough. I know she speaks truth. I know she feels pain. I know she watched her world burn and still stands here with no hate in her heart, only sorrow and strength. Commander looked at the woman, now at her calm breath and steady eyes in perfect stillness. Then back at him and said, you are a fool. He said, maybe, but I am not wrong. They locked him in a small room, walls, gray lights, dim air, thick with judgment. They said, wait. They said, we will decide soon. They said, maybe you are sick, maybe she controls your mind, maybe you lost your way. She came to him, in secret, silent as wind slipping past locked doors, her steps light, her voice softer than a whisper. She said, they will not listen. He said, then we leave together. She said, if we do, they will hunt us both. They will say we are dangerous. They will say we must be stopped. He looked at her with fire in his eyes and said, then let them come. Door opened before morning. The commander returned alone, her face unreadable. She said, you are being watched. We are not fools, but we are not ready to believe either. So she stays under guard and you stay under orders. He said, no. She said, think before you speak again. He said, I have thought, I have seen, I have chosen. The commander stared at him, then at the woman, who stood with no fear, and finally said, then go. But if anything goes wrong, if she harms anyone, if you lie to us again, we will land this, and we will not ask twice. He took her hand, not as a lover, not as a hero, but as someone who knows the weight of a promise and the shape of a vow. They walked through the halls, past eyes full of doubt, past hands ready to strike, past hearts closed by fear. In the quiet of the living quarters, she sat beside the small window, watching stars pass like ghosts. She said, you gave up your place for me. He said, no, I gave up my silence for truth, and my safety for something worth saving. She said, I do not know what comes next. He said, neither do I, but we will face it side by side, and somewhere deep in the ship, in a place no one could see, a new path began to form, shaped not by war or fear or blood, but by choice, by trust, by the strange bond between two souls who refused to break. Asterisk. The sirens began without warning, sharp and cold, cutting through the silence. Like a blade through cloth, red lights flashed across the ceiling, walls shifted, and doors locked with heavy clicks. Voices shouted through the intercom, words without meaning, only noise, only fear. She stood in the center of the room, hands open, eyes steady like a storm trapped in a bottle. She said, they know. The human did not ask how. He trusted her now, more than machines, more than rules, more than anything built by hands that feared what they did not understand. He grabbed his gear and opened the door, alarms screaming louder with every breath outside. The hallway was chaos, soldiers running, people shouting, weapons drawn, confusion. Spreading like fire, he pulled her close and whispered, "Stay with me. Do not stop, do not speak." She nodded once. And they moved fast through narrow paths, through shadowed halls, through doors only he could unlock his heart. Pounding not from fear, but from purpose, each step a promise, each corner a risk. A voice echoed from above, the commander's voice, cold and heavy. She said, "Attention, all unit subject has escaped. She is considered dangerous. The officer who brought her in is now marked as rogue. If seen, do not wait to engage." He whispered to her, "They will shoot on sight." She said, "Then we move faster." They slipped into the lower decks, past broken machines and leaking pipes. A place forgotten by the clean boots of command, a place for ghosts and dust and secrets. He remembered hiding here once as a child, sneaking through darkness to escape punishment. Now he returned with someone the world wanted erased. Footsteps followed them, sharp and fast, too close to outrun. He turned and raised his weapon, told her to keep going. But she stayed, her hand raised, not in fear, but in warning. The guards came in, pairs armored and armed, ready to kill, ready to silence. But before they could fire, she moved. Her eyes flashed bright, her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and the air around her bent like heat on metal. Guards froze, voices trapped inside their throats, guns shaking in hands that no longer felt strong. She stepped forward slowly and said, "I will not hurt you, but I will not be taken." They dropped their weapons and backed away, eyes wide, as if seeing something not meant for this world, something holy or cursed or both. She turned to the human and said, "Go now before they call for more." Ran again through darkness, through smoke, through silence filled with danger. The ship around them groaned like a beast in pain. Lights dimmed, floors cracked, metal screaming beneath their feet. He asked, "How did you do that? What did you show them?" She said, "Not what I am, but what they fear and what they wish they could be." He said, "They will come again stronger next time." She said, "Then I will be stronger too." They reached the edge of the bay where small ships slept under thick glass and heavy code. He pulled out his badge, his ID, his key, everything he had earned, now used to escape the place. He once swore to protect. The lock clicked, and the door opened, revealing a ship just big enough for two. She stepped inside and touched the wall like greeting an old friend, her fingers glowing soft as the ship came alive, lights pulsing gently, engines humming like a lullaby for steel and stars. He started the launch sequence. Voice calm, hands sure despite the storm behind them. He said, "Once we fly, there is no going back." She looked at him with the eyes of someone who had already lost everything and said, "I have nowhere left to go, only forward, only with youth." Lifted slowly, the bay doors creaking open, wind rushing and lights flashing behind them as soldiers arrived, too late, weapons raised. But no clear shot, no command to fire, only confusion, only fear of what she might do. Next they broke free from the station into open space, stars unfolding before them like endless roads, waiting for footsteps that dared to dream. The human leaned back in his seat, breath shaky, heart loud but full. She sat beside him, quiet eyes on the stars, voice calm. She said, "I felt their minds, the ones who tried to take me. I saw their thoughts, their orders, their fear. They do not want peace, they want power, and they fear what they cannot control." He said, "They will chase us, they will not stop." She said, "Then we run, then we fight, then we show them what it means to be free." The ship moved fast through the dark, cutting through space like a blade through silence behind them. The station shrank smaller and smaller until it was just another light lost among millions. He looked at her, hands glowing faint, her breath steady, her body still holding pain but her spirit unbroken, and said, "You are not what they said. You are not a threat. You are a voice they tried to silence but could not." She looked at him with something soft in her eyes, something close to hope, and said, "And you are not what they feared either. You are not cruel, not blind, not cold. You are the reason I believe again." They flew on into the unknown with nothing but truth between them and the universe waiting to hear their story. The stars outside were quiet, like whispers that had forgotten their words. Space around the ship was dark and endless, yet safe for now, safe in the way dreams are safe before waking. The human sat by the controls, eyes fixed on the scanner, hoping nothing would follow, but knowing deep inside that silence never lasted forever. She stood behind him, watching the map flicker, watching the past fall away with every mile between them. Her hands rested on the edge of the console, her breath calm but deep like the sea before a storm. She asked, "Where are we going?" He said, "To a base far from the center, a place off-grid one. I trust, maybe still a friend there, maybe still time to think." She said, "Do you believe that?" He said, "I want to." They flew for hours, without words, each lost in thoughts too heavy for air. Her mind tracing memories of her world falling, his mind replaying voices warning him not to trust, not to hope, not to care. When they reached the base, it floated like a sleeping giant, black metal against blue stars, hidden in shadows, powered down but alive. He sent the signal code, old but valid. After a long pause, the doors opened, and they entered without alarms, without guns, without fear. Inside, the air was stale, the lights dim, the halls quiet, like old ruins left behind by time. A man waited by the gate, tall, sharp eyes older than his face, his uniform half worn, like someone who had once followed rules but no longer cared to remember why. He smiled at the human and said, "Never thought I'd see you again. Not after what you did, not after what they said." The human nodded and said, "I had no choice." The man looked past him at her, standing still, eyes watching every move he made. The man said, "Is that her, the one they want?" The human said, "She is more than what they say." The man laughed soft and slow and said, "They always are." They were given a room, deep underground, hidden and shielded with steel thick as lies. The lights there were warm, the floor clean, the silence almost peaceful. She touched the walls and said, "This place feels forgotten." The human said, "That is why we are here, but peace is never real when eyes are watching and words are whispered behind closed doors. When food arrives too fast and questions too gentle, when the silence begins to press, not protect." She told him one night, "I feel something wrong. I do not know where, I do not know who, but something breathes nearby, and it is not peace." He told her, "I trust him. He saved my life once." She said, "Trust can be a mask." He said, "Maybe, but I have nothing else left." He left her sleeping and went to speak with the man again. Down a narrow hallway filled with lights that blinked like nervous thoughts, the man waited near a console, reading data too quickly, eyes moving like snakes across a field. The human said, "Is anyone looking for us?" The man said, "Not yet, but someone will. They always do." The human said, "I need more time." She needs safety. The man said, "And what do I get in return?" Human paused, unsure, and then said, "I will owe you whatever it takes." The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes, and said, "Good to know." Back in the room, she stood at the door, eyes closed, breathing slow, like listening to air that dared not move. She said softly, "They are coming." He said, "Who?" She said, "Not soldiers. Not yet, but the lie is coming." He opened the door and saw two guards standing there, weapons low, eyes calm, too calm. One said, "We need her for a scan, just to check, nothing more." He said, "No one touches her without my word." The guard said, "Orders." From above she stepped forward and said, "I will go, but only if he comes too." They walked through halls too quiet, with walls that seemed to listen, with doors that seemed to lean. In the room they entered was clean, too clean, like a cage waiting to become real. They asked her to sit. They smiled too much. They said, "Just a scan, just data, just safety." She looked at the screen, then at the cables, then at the faces behind glass, and said, "This is not for safety, this is for study." The human turned to the man who had brought them here, the man who once saved him, the man who now looked away and said nothing. The human said, "You promised." The man said, "I said I would help. I never said why." The human stepped in front of her, raised his weapon, said, "She leaves with me now or this place burns." The guards froze, unsure, not trained for this, not ready for hearts that choose people over orders. She touched the human's shoulder gently and said, "We do not fight here, we escape." In a flash of light, she moved faster than sight, faster than sound, faster than fear. She knocked down the guards, bent the machines, broke the scan before it could finish, then ran with him. Through smoke, through sirens, through screams, as the base shook behind them and the alarms howled louder. Then guilt. The human looked back, once saw the man staring through fire, saying nothing at all. And he knew then that not all betrayals come with hate, some come with silence and some with Regret they escaped into space again, chased by those who once offered shelter, now hunted again, now stronger, now together. Asterisk. The stars were no longer quiet. They flickered like sparks before fire, like warnings before storms. The ship moved fast across the edge of deep space engines, humming with urgency. Walls shaking with memory, her hands rested on the console, steady and glowing, her eyes locked on the screen that showed red lights gathering like wolves around a wounded deer. Human stood behind her, silent, eyes heavy with questions, voice low with fire. He said, "How many are coming?" She said, "More than we can count, more than we can outrun, but not more than we can face." He said, "We are only two." She turned to him with something new in her eyes, not just strength, not just calm, but a quiet storm, and said, "Not anymore." She pressed her fingers against the map, her skin lighting up in soft waves, her thoughts moving through the ship like breath through lungs, calling out through hidden signals, lost frequencies, forgotten channels, reaching minds that once believed they were alone. The human watched as the ship answered back one by one, dots blinking on the screen, signals from other ships. Small voices scattered across the stars, voices that had stayed quiet until now. She said, "They were taken, like news, like me, broken like me. They have waited for someone to call, someone to believe." He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Starting something they cannot stop." From the corners of space, old ships began to move, rusty wings, engines, damaged hulls, cracked but hearts burning, survivors, outlaws, rebels, each one carrying pain, each one holding anger, each one ready, came not with flags, not with orders, not with plans, but with purpose. They came because someone finally said enough. They came because she asked, not with force, but with truth. The human stood in the middle of the room, watching it unfold, watching history begin, not with an explosion, but with a whisper. He said, "They will see this as war." She said, "It is not war, it is reckoning." She opened the files taken from the base, the scans, the tests, the records of those taken, of those changed, of those erased, names, numbers, faces, all stored like data, not like life. She sent them out into the world, every screen, every signal, every network flooded with proof, not of battle, but of betrayal. The universe watched, some turned away afraid, some watched in silence. Some wept, some screamed, and some answered. The enemy responded fast, sharp, and cruel. Fleets deployed, orders sent, bounties placed. Her face on every wall, her name twisted, her purpose smeared. They said she was dangerous. They said she was a weapon. They said she was not real, but she was, and they could not stop what had already begun. The humans said, "They will come for us first. They will send everything they have." She said, "Let them try." They moved toward a forgotten moon where the signal was strongest, where others waited, not soldiers, but survivors, hiding in caves, living in shadows, carrying scars on their skin and in their souls. They welcomed her, not with fear, not with worship, but with quiet nods and tears. She walked among them, not above them, not apart, but beside them, listening, touching, healing where she could, and where she could not, she stayed until the pain eased. She found children who had never known peace, mothers who had lost everyone, fathers who had lost themselves, and she gave them something no machine, no army, no empire ever could. She gave them voice. Human trained them, showed them how to fight, not with rage, but with focus, not with hate, but with hope. They built weapons from scrap shields, from broken ships, plans from old dreams. When the enemy came, they were ready. The sky over the moon lit up with fire, ships falling like stars, defenders rising from dust, each one a story, each one a wound turned into will. She stood at the front, not with armor, not with fear, but with fire in her veins and light in her hands. Battle was not clean, it was not fair, it was not beautiful, but it was theirs, and they did not fall. She moved through the enemy lines like wind through flame-touching systems, breaking control, freeing minds, trapped in machines, turning weapons back on those who built them. The human fought beside her, shoulder to shoulder, never behind, never above, each breath, shared each danger, faced with the same fire, the same vow. And when the last enemy ship fell into the sea of dust and the sky turned quiet once more, she stood among her people, not as a savior, but as a spark. The human looked at her and said, "This is only the beginning." She said, "Yes, And the end, they fear, has already started around them. The survivors began to rise not as victims, not as broken, not as shadows, but as voices together as one and across the stars. In places still silent, others watched and waited, hearts waking, minds turning, chains cracking as the truth spread, not as a scream, but as a promise. Something had changed, and nothing would be the same again. The sky was not blue, it was ash and fire, a broken canvas painted by warships burned above like falling stars, and smoke covered the ground like a blanket. Native sorrow bodies lay still, metal and flesh, side by side, names forgotten in the noise of the battle that just ended. She stood in the center of the ruined valley, her hands glowing, her breath, shallow eyes looking toward the horizon where the last of the enemy fleet had disappeared into darkness, not fleeing but falling, defeated by something they never understood. The human walked slowly toward her, his steps heavy with pain and memory, his armor cracked, blood on his cheek, smoke in his lungs, but still standing because he had to, because she was still there. He said, "It is done." She said, "Not yet." He looked at her and saw what the others could not, saw the cracks in her skin, the trembling in her fingers, the light inside her dimming like a candle in the wind. He stepped closer and said, "You need rest." She said, "I need to finish." The machine buried beneath the earth was waking up, ancient and vast wires spread like roots, signals pulsing through stone. It was not a weapon, it was something worse. A signal builder, a mind breaker, designed to erase thoughts, to rewrite history, to silence every voice that dared to resist. She touched the core with one hand, her light flowing into the dark circuits, her mind entering a place no one could follow. The pain was sharp, the pressure endless, every part of her being pulled and stretched. Every memory tested, every truth questioned. He reached for her, but stopped. Her voice echoed in his mind, soft and far away, "Do not come. I must do this alone." He watched as her body shook, as the light grew brighter, as her scream filled the air without sound, a scream made of soul and fire and loss. He fell to his knees, not in fear, not in surrender, but in respect. Machine began to fall apart, wires burning, metal melting, the earth shaking as if trying to scream back, but it could not match her voice. And then silence. He looked up and she was gone. No body, no shadow, only dust glowing where she stood, only light drifting into the air, like fireflies in morning. Whispered her name, the one she had never spoken, the one she said meant light that refuses to die. And in that moment, he understood what it truly meant. He walked back to the others' faces, dirty eyes, red clothes torn. They looked at him and knew from his silence what she had given, what they had lost. There were no speeches, no flags, no songs, only quiet hands building new shelters, clearing broken walls, helping wounded enemies and allies alike, because the fight was over and the healing had to begin. He sat alone at the edge of the valley each night, watching the stars, waiting for a sign, hoping for a dream where she might speak again. One night the stars flickered differently. The ship they had flown together long ago returned by itself, hovering in the sky, then landing gently as if guided by memory. He entered and the lights turned on, slow and warm. Her voice filled the room, not live, not full, only a recording triggered by his touch. She said, "If you are hearing this, I am gone, not dead, not ended, only changed. I gave what I could, because I had to, because you showed me something greater than survival. You showed me humanity, not as a name, not as a race, but as a choice." Listened without tears, because tears could not hold what he felt, only silence could. She said, "I have left something behind, not just words, not just memory, but connection. I am part of the network, now part of the stars, part of the systems that once hurt us. I have turned them into hope, into safety, into bridges where walls once stood. Left the ship and walked through the new cities being built, not of glass and steel, but of kindness and effort. People worked together, species once divided, now side by side. Children playing without fear, elders telling stories again, names being remembered, songs being sung. Had not just won a war, they had won themselves back. Years passed and statues were made, stories written. Her face remembered, not as a weapon, not as a savior, but as a spark. Human grew older, slower, his hair turned gray, his voice softer, but his eyes never lost that fire. And on The last night of his life, he stood under the stars, looked up, and whispered the name one last time. The stars shimmered in answer, and for a moment, the air around him felt warm and full, as if she was there, as if she had never truly left, because she had become something more than a memory, something more than a hero. She had become the light itself, the proof that one voice, one choice, one bond could change the galaxy forever. And so the story did not end, lived on in every act of courage, in every moment of truth, in every heart that chose to rise instead of fall.